is what makes a player great, their ability to seize that moment and make sure that they are their best at that time.
And believing in the moment. If you don't have a belief system, it's very hard to execute when the moment's there.
That's Roger Rasheed. He's a familiar face in the tennis world, best known for coaching top players like Lleyton Hewitt and for his work as a commentator with the Seven Network. His public persona has always been that of a fierce competitor and a charismatic man who's tough and unfazed by pressure. But of course, like all of us, Roger's human. In this chat, he opens up about self-doubt, the challenge in letting down the wall, and how he's now finding power in allowing himself to be vulnerable like he never has before. Sport as we know it is changing. More and more athletes are being encouraged to own their truth and share who they really are and how they really feel. It's empowering the next generation to love themselves and in doing so, love the game even more. It's a positive change Roger's now all about promoting and one he's adopted into his own philosophy. Here's Roger, but not as you know him.
Let's start by talking about seizing the window of opportunity. What's the magic in only having a limited amount of time to reach your potential?
Good question. Depends what that time looks like. Is it 1 week? Is it a month? Is it 3? Is it 3 years? Depending on the timeline of people, I think, and the journey that you're on. So I just think the reality of it all is that, can I step on the right stones every day to give myself an opening when it's there and ready for me? So my philosophies are that make yourself be present and actually make yourself available to the door being open more often than not. And so therefore it means looking after a bit of the detail.
So when elite players come to you, how often are they aware of the clock ticking?
It's hard because I think a lot of times you can, depending on your journey upwards, if you're someone who's had to really grind away and hasn't had a lot of, that sort of spotlight success, you're aware that every opportunity is pretty important, and you're really sort of clutching at everything that's in front of you. So you're a lot hungrier in that sort of sense. If it's someone that's had a lot of success all the time, you can get up in sort of the professional ranks, for example, and then think it's going to just unfold. And that's when it doesn't really, because once you get into the professional ranks of sport or in life in general, it's a bigger pool and it's a different type of pool because it's now not underage. You're now in the open, in the open waters, and there's a lot of people out there that can do a job just as well as you can. So it's then about, as I said, it's about the execution of all the little detail and how hungry you can stay.
Do you see that complacency sometimes with players thinking that they're going to be able to play forever and their health's going to continue to last? Do you come across that much?
Complacency, it varies, I think, because your journey changes. When you're first starting out, you had the dream of wanting to be that player, that athlete, that individual in life. And then if you do reach it, you're then hungry for a period of time, and then things can become normal, if you know what I mean. So
they get used to winning.
You get used to it, and so it's about continually redirecting what you're after, what you're going to chase.
Repositioning the goalposts.
Yeah, exactly. So refreshing. How am I up? What's my upkeep look like? What's my delivery going to be? Where's my what's the education I'm taking on board to develop and actually build a bigger beast, being me, and then actually looking at the competition and how that's going to unfold, and what do I need to stay relevant in the marketplace of an athlete or of a sport or a business. So I think that's more importantly is how often can you engage to hit the refresh button, and the more you do that, I think more you can build excitement within your environment, because as you said, it's the toughest part about it is to get complacent and feel like I'm here, I've made it. And things will just roll on now, and then you get comfortable about what level of the chase do you really want. When you're young, if I take tennis for example, when you're or a footballer or anybody at any sport, I want to be the best in the world. When someone interviews you, if you're a 10-year-old kid, right?
That's what they all say.
I want to be the number one in the world. That picture looks good at 10, and then when you become a professional, the picture might not look. You might not feel like you can reach that. There's only one person that gets there, or there's a handful, and that rotate through there, but. Wow, I don't quite have that tool set. So they then become comfortable in just the professional game and just being one of the players that's earning a good living, having a great life, which is fine. So things continually change as you go through the journey.
And realizing their potential.
Yeah, and potential is interesting because, you can have someone with enormous tools, and that's potential, and you can have someone with enormous work ethic. What is potential? Well, there's a whole. That's a massive umbrella. Different things take you to different spots, and so I just think it's more about how can you keep adapting and pushing yourself. So you'll find more about yourself as you actually add things to your game and to your toolkit, and the challenges that come towards you. The better players you're playing or going up against, the more you're educated about what you might need, versus actually think not what you need.
What do you say to players who have great potential and they have the capacity to go out and do it? They're healthy at this time. They've got the time in their life. What's your advice to them?
My advice is, there's great potential, and then are you marrying that up with work ethic? And are you passionate about the journey you're on? So if I'm passionate about the position I'm taking, the rest sort of unfolds from there because you're hungry and you'll hunt it down. And then it's about marrying the potential up with your work ethic. So if you have enormous potential, but you can't marry it up with real elite work ethic, the distribution's wrong. And so therefore the person with potential, they'll get to a level, but they won't be able to ignite and crystallize all the things that they have in front of them because they're not prepared to really do the things that matter the most when people aren't watching. And that's what matters the most. When people aren't watching, what are you doing? And if you can perform and act and behave the right way when people aren't watching, that means getting dirty and rolling your sleeves up. If you can do that in its highest level, well, then the rest is just the show.
Well said.
It's the enjoyment part. You know what I mean? It's why people buy the tickets.
How much does greatness come down to capitalizing on a series of moments?
Greatness of the athlete?
Yeah, overall. So what makes a player great? Their ability to seize that moment and make sure that they are their best at that time.
And believing in the moment. So the biggest hurdle that we have, I think, in life is, do we really believe? So when we're, whether it's any job, do you believe that you can be the best in that field? When you're starting out, you have an ego. We all have an ego, and we go there and we think that we've got a position, but do we actually believe it? And so you actually got to earn belief system gets built up in time. It's about, as I said, it's about jumping on the right stones. And so the more you do, the more you get in front of a competition, the more you start believing that you have the tools, the better players and the better people that you can come in front of, the more they actually allow you to grow and understand what you need to be great, and to actually excel in your delivery. And then once you get into that space, you've got a belief system now which actually underpins everything that you'll do moving forward. And but I think the reality is if you don't have a belief system, it's very hard to execute when the moment's there, because you'll default to a bit of doubt, so you won't pull the trigger on maybe what looks like low percentage activity that actually can give you big rewards. Whereas if you watch the great players play each other, they play on the edge. They walk out and they play on the edge, whether it's tennis, whether it's golf. If it was two swimmers jumping in doing the 1500, they're putting it on the line. There's nothing that they can't hide, because greatness is playing greatness. And so you need to be vulnerable and put yourself out there, and that's what the best players do.
How has your self-belief developed over your life?
I'm still struggling. I don't even know what I'm doing here. No, I'm joking. You got to earn that, and at certain, I've continually go to this day. You ask yourself those questions because things change in your life all the time. So that question's always, I think, sits in front of you, and so and I always revert back to, what's my work ethic like? What's my morals? And can I live? I got to live through my morals and what I respect in life. And so, I've had, as a coach, initially, was my belief system strong? I believed in my own mind what I thought I'd like to offer as a product, and I designed that, and I eventually molded that with the players that I had in front of me. So I had a centerpiece of that, and then they sort of added to that as well. And so it was, and I think that their success and what they were able to do on the court and the challenges that we took in front of us and were able to conquer at times and also obviously not get the outcomes we wanted, those things then solidified what I thought was the right product, and that changed continually. But that I think that builds more belief in what you're doing.
Has your self-belief ever wavered?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you'd be stupid if you thought it wasn't that. My self-belief at times was, there's always a bit of doubt at times when, say, you have a major loss. If I look at sport, for example, major loss, did I do the right thing? Was I? And so all I do is I then backtrack and look at the detail, and that's why I talk about detail. So if I've got all the detail right, then I can actually go back.
So being able to break it down gives you back that control.
Yeah, exactly. So because if you can sit in a world of of not believing and doubting yourself, and that can spiral into something pretty dramatic as a person, and mentally that can really destroy a lot of the qualities about you because you continually sit in that world of doubt. So yes, doubt plays out in a bigger way when you actually don't, when the preparation's really poor. And so and I think so in the sporting sense, yes, it's questioned a lot. It's rubber stamped in a positive a lot because I look at the detail that's behind it.
What was it like for you to have to give up your playing career?
It was tough. Yeah, it's when you're a young person growing up and you have a dream and you think you're going to have a long career in a sport, and you've got a lot of good attributes, and you think, yeah, there's an opportunity for me. And then when it's taken away from you, it was taken away very young. I knew I was in struggle town with my body from a young age.
How young were you?
15. So that was a process for me to. You don't believe that you're out of the game yet, but at 21, when you're out of the game completely, you still don't believe it because you think, in a couple of years' times, maybe I can get things right. But it was hard to know what your identity was. So you were trying to build your identity, and also getting into the professional ranks. So you actually again had to earn your stripes, build the belief system, and then that's taken away from you. So what's your identity then as an athlete? And then finding that space isn't easy, and it's it's a journey that a lot of people are on when they finish their careers as well. When they've had long careers, what's my journey? What's my identity after that? So I think that's the hardest thing with everybody is what's your identity. And so I was able to, over time, find a space that worked for me, and that happened. That was fortunate. I was fortunate enough that was coaching.
And can you describe the difference in performing when the stakes are very high, which you've experienced a lot, and performing when they're not?
Yeah, for example, look, if I give you an example, if you've got a big time athlete, and let's just take a tennis tournament, the Australian Open, for example, those early rounds in that tournament when you're the big favourite versus a person has nothing to lose, who steps on the court and they can just freeball it.
You're thinking about it a lot more.
You're playing someone who's not really inspiring you because they're not, an elite athlete at the very pinnacle of the sport. They're inspired by the brilliance of another athlete. They're inspired by what the competition looks like. That big matchup, the adrenaline of the crowd, the adrenaline that builds up inside their stomachs when they're going to walk onto an arena, knowing that the opposition have got so many weapons and they do as well, and it's just about putting it on the court. So that level of excitement is not there in the first or second round. So you've got to manufacture something, and you're not as challenged as much by the opposition. They're coming at you with a bit more of a cap gun than a bazooka. So you feel like you can, so the adrenaline level is not quite the same. So that's the hardest part of getting the calibration right. And then when you've got the athlete so you're just trying to get through those rounds. So you've got to put things in front of athletes that can inspire them, that little targets that they can aim for through those moments. And then once they get into the world of a second week, for example, of the tournament where it's almost like for like, then you just let them go because the athletes, they know what their job is. is to get out there and compete, and they know what they need to bring to the table. Then, so it's you don't hide anything. You put it all out there, and it's the physicality's there, and you can't hide anything because you know at the other end, if you do, you're going to get taken out. So so it's sort of a, it's almost like being on, it's a war type mentality. It's like you and me, let's go. Don't hold anything back.
What about those young players that haven't played in front of crowds like that before, and then they go and play in, say, their first Open, and all of a sudden there they are on that stage that they've been building up in their minds over all these years? What can happen in their bodies, and why can their performances go to shit sometimes?
Yeah, depending on how long you're right. It goes to shit. You're right. It depends on how long. If I've got 2 days to prepare and I'm a first round of a tournament, I'm going to play, Roger Federer, for example, and I've got 2 days to think about it. The draws come out and there it is. The excitement's there, but the nervous energy about what to expect. I'd always love the athlete to be educated in what it looks like. What does the walk onto that court look like? Make yourself very aware of those things. So I'd taken through the rehearsal.
A lot of visualization.
Yeah, visualization, but more so rehearse it. I would get them there live to actually do the walk and talk to them about what the walk would look like. What would their experience be when they walk down to the stairs and they're going to walk onto the court, the roar of a crowd, and what does that mean? And so they understand what that looks like. Which seat will they sit on? So they actually get some comfort around an environment which is uncomfortable. For the best players in the world, that's part of their toolkit.
A mental preparation.
Big crowds doing the walk, cameras in their faces. That's all part of their toolkit. That's normal for them. Every day of the week, they walk out to that environment. Whereas other players that don't have that centre court experience, that can be quite daunting. And then also you get on a court like that, for example, and the backstops are another 3 or 4 metres. The court surface area is enormous with the stands. So you can get lost in the playing field, which is another thing that you've got to actually educate the player about.
If they're not used to seeing all these things at once, they could get rattled.
You can see them and watch them on TV. Professional, there are a lot of professional tennis players that had never stepped on a centre court at Wimbledon or the US Open. Or the French Open, and then all of a sudden they've got to turn up and play a quarterfinals match because they've won a few matches and they've now got Rafa Nadal at Roland Garros. God, that's a daunting prospect. But just knowing what Rafa does that in his sleep, and now I've got to go do that. But then I've got to take on the challenge of that person. So there's a lot of different balls in the air, and it's about, as I said, it's about giving them all the tools so they can have some comfort around it. And then, sometimes it can surprise you, because they can come out and play very free and not concerned about the environment, and others can get swallowed up by the environment, and it can actually ruin their careers. There've been a lot of players that have struggled to come back from big time environments because of the experience they had.
Because we know the mental aspect of sport outweighs the physical in many ways. Where does your will to win come from?
I love competition. Always have as a young kid. I think I just like the fact that there's a competition on. So you get the challenge, there's a score. And so that's the first thing. That was just generally, that's part of my DNA at school or anywhere, like any young kid. A lot of kids, there are some that don't like competition, but I've loved it. And then I think my passion for it as a coach has very much been around the fact that I was never able to compete fully as an athlete because of, my disabilities, that shut me down. So when I was shut down, to be able to do that and use others as the horse to ride, and I've been fortunate enough to have unbelievable talent, but to then be able to step on the big stages, to be on the big courts, and other athletes that I spend time with around the world, their big moments, not just tennis, that's exciting. It's, and so the fact that I've had the ability to actually play the game out or play the sporting life out through some outstanding talent is, I'm very fortunate. That's something that I always say, wow, that's a pretty cool journey.
Have you always felt like you've had something to prove?
No, I've got nothing to prove. I've never felt like but I am competitive within myself when I'm playing. The one thing I was always big on is that I never wanted to have the finger pointed at me, in the sense that I never wanted to be someone who was just sitting and, as I said, riding on the horse and enjoying a ride. I was doing it for the right reasons. I'm prepared to get a job and not have the job the next day. If it's the right thing for the athlete, I was always wanting to know that win or don't get that result of a win, that there was never a finger being able to point that preparation was poor, not into it. So I was really detailed about what the back end looked like, and I understood that if we got that right more times than not and actually did the right thing there, the product we put on the playing arena on match day and on competition week was always going to be available to get a positive result. So that's what I'm always proud of, is that I don't let anyone down with a lack of resources. And that doesn't mean giving them a whole heap of information. It just means making sure their body's ready for competition. So I always put it like, if you're going to go out into a boxing ring and I'm taking on Mike Tyson, you'd have to prepare, wouldn't you? You wouldn't
run, probably.
You wouldn't want to, or you might run and just fall and cop the millions. But I'll take the first hit. But I think, you know what I mean. Like, if you're a boxer and boxers go out in the boxing ring, if you're not prepared, you get found out pretty quickly, because it's a physical combat. So I sort of treat the tennis court a little bit like that. If you're out there and it's got to be a combat where you're prepared to put yourself in the line, thinking that you can get through every part of that journey. So whether it's the start of the match or whether it's 3.5 hours into the match, that I'm capable to bring out my assets in the right possible manner. So the resilience, to build that resilience, to build that ability to actually sustain the opposition to, that what's coming at you, and then still think clearly that I can push back when I need to, when I'm ready to. Sometimes you won't be ready to, because there may be a fatigue factor around it, but you're going to get another second wind, because you've done all the work that's given you that chance. So again, it's building a belief system that here's my product.
And underneath it all, doing that work and being able to go back to that and know that, you are ready for the moment because you did the work, and that if you didn't do the work, that's when you shouldn't be on the stage.
Well, and that's where the enormous doubt comes in, right? So you don't, when you don't,
because doing the work's like an anchor. You can go back to that in your mind and say,
always,
well, you've done
it's
the work.
in the bank. Yeah. And so, and that you've done the work, and you've spent that amount of time on that product. So you actually, when you go out there, it's available to me.
Be there,
whereas things become, that your fuel tank has to be at a premium for a long period of time. Yes, from the start it's full, and then it sort of slowly moves its way down, but it's got to be a slow bleed. It can't be, there can't be a big hole at the bottom of the tank really quickly. So it's funny, because that's not complex. It's not complicated. My thinking is not complicated. It's very simplistic. It's about, because the model of sport or the journey of competition, your job's not to complicate it. Your job's to keep it as simplistic as possible, and let the athlete and let the person be able to play freely and just flow. Because the more instinctive that we play the sport or go through life, the more we're prepared to let things go. When we have to robotically be manufactured and play sport, I think that's a really it's a depressing way to. I watch it now with football. The footballer that gets drafted, and they've got this enormous amount of natural ability, but then they get pocketed into a certain position.
Play, and so they never reach their potential.
And they get pocketed into a certain position. They're tight, and they're really squashed. So a lot of careers are actually ruined in the first 1 or 2 years because they've been suppressed.
And then they lose their confidence because they're not performing 100%. Like they should be. Yeah.
And now they doubt. They were the young kid who actually was drafted, one of the top draft picks, or, wow, I was talented.
But they're just trying to live up to something, and they don't have the avenue to do it.
Correct.
And they fall apart.
And so it's about the coaches that can let people go and then see what comes out from there. Yeah.
What about scrutiny? How have you dealt with scrutiny over your career?
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Have a crack at me now.
Can't think of anything to say.
No, I think it's great. I mean, you're in a public environment, so you're out there to the world to see, and you're on the biggest stages in the world, and you're looking after big stars. So when you're doing that, that with that package comes all the it'll come the media attention. When it's good, it's good. When you don't get the outcomes that the media think you should, or someone doesn't agree about your philosophy as the way you're going about it, they'll write it and they'll say it, and that's great. Everyone's got an opinion. I'll listen to everything. If someone wants to come up to me and talk to me, I remember one year someone sent me a email with about 4,000 diagrams. If you hit the ball here and the player's there, if you hit it back there, they won't be able to get it. And it kept going like that. And basically it was saying if you hit the ball away from the player. But But I listened to that person. I replied. It took me a while. But so yes, I'm happy to. I listen to it. I can learn from it. There's some things obviously that I have a pretty thick. I'll filter stuff out as well that I if I think they're on sort of an agenda. But it doesn't bother me. I'd be disappointed if people didn't do their job and have that opinion, because I just think that's their job. They see it. I can hold an apple here, and you and I will see it completely different. You'll see a banana. You know what? I just made that up.
Has it ever gotten under your skin? Have you had to develop this over years?
No. Sometimes if someone takes a personal pot shot of what I'm doing with an athlete, and out of left field, and because of an outcome, and goes hard and wants to continue on with that and create a whole lot of theories, do I take it personally? Not really, but I don't mind. I'm happy to have a conversation with them and ask them why they came up with that outcome, and maybe then, and if it was a good theory, great. But if it's maybe then I can actually give them a bit of education and a bit of backstory around what they might have missed out. So it doesn't. I like it, and I've actually been on the end of some big moments. But I just think that's a sporting journey anyway.
They might not like to say it to your face either, I reckon.
Yeah, and obviously with social media and all those things now, that you can actually, obviously, if you want to, you can take a look and actually decide to get involved in that world. But it's one of the things that actually really hurts athletes as well now is the fact that their decision to choose to read, where I've always said to the athletes, it's pretty easy. You can filter out your feeds pretty quickly. If someone wants to abuse you can delete and remove them. And so over time, you'll be able to filter, you'll create a filter which has generally got, positive commentary through it. If you do like looking at social media, and if you don't, well, then don't look at it. It's pretty simple. You have an option.
And when you reflect now, have there been times over your career where you felt like you were really struggling under the pressure, whether as a coach or initially when you used to be a player, or even outside of that in your personal life?
When I was, I've struggled. Personally, we all struggle. I think I've gone through a divorce, so you struggle. So that's a moment, but in personal, my sporting life. I mean, as a young player trying to grow up, my family didn't have funds, so I did some amazing things. It's, live in bomb shelters, eat the same food, breakfast, lunch and dinner, bread roll and ham and cheese. Not great for tennis. I wouldn't restring my rackets if they needed to be restrung, because it would cost my parents too much, money at the time. So, I'd wear the same shoes forever and a day, even if they did have grip or didn't have grip. So, I did things at real extreme. I remember running in Korea, down a highway against traffic. I could barely see anyway. They wouldn't have been able to see me either through the smog, but that was me getting some exercise instead of using the gym, because I had to pay for the gym. So all of this stuff to save my parents any form of finances, so I could get onto the journey.
So that drive that you've got, that seems like that's largely come out of that childhood and not having things that were available to you and having to fight for everything, and therefore appreciating it.
Yeah, sure. My parents did that. My parents, they came from Lebanon and had to make their way in Australia. Pretty ballsy. From anyone that's come from overseas and doesn't speak the language and has come from a long way, you only have one road to travel, and that's to make things happen. You don't have a road of comfort. You don't have a road of, I can just take it easy for a while. There's no support. You get over here and you go down the road of making sure things work for you. And actually, if they don't, find another solution. So every day you wake up, you need an outcome. And you need to make it work, because you need, for my father, he needed to provide for his wife. And then when they had children, he needed to provide. And he only knew one way: learn to speak the language, learn to get on with people, and learn to do and have some disciplines about doing things well. Because if he didn't do things well, he wouldn't have got rewarded, by financially rewarded, so he could actually put food on the table. So when you look at that, that's a great model to have been brought up with, because it was a no bullshit model. And I love the fact that that's what it was. And when I go back in my, when I reflect now, it's where all my learnings were. the bolster, the foundations of it.
So how much does your philosophy now align with the way your father raised you?
Most of it, yeah. Obviously, there's, my father was he was action and not many words, and loved it because and I said he needed an outcome. He made life simple. He kept things simple when he needed, and it rewarded him because he didn't get cluttered. And he used the skills he had. He kept developing his skills, and he knew how to, he just, as I said, it was one road. And then once you get down that road far enough, other things open up. There's another road, and there's a street over here I can take, and that gives me a few other opportunities, and there are other things. So it's about putting yourself on that journey first, where because it creates a whole lot of discipline. It was, as I said, my dad did detail. He had to have discipline. He had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and come home at 6 o'clock at night. No one else could. And he had to provide for his family. And so you just followed as a young child. So did we miss out on stuff? Not really. But we learnt to appreciate, because you got one football at the start of the footy season.
You better not lose it.
And if you kicked it in a tree, which I did, well, you bloody go
You're
get
going
it.
up the tree.
Yeah, you get it. And it doesn't matter how high it is, you go get that tree, because that's the last footy you're getting. So, and tennis rackets was the same. I got a couple of rackets, and I was lucky enough to, have a little sponsor that, gave you that gave you a couple of rackets if I broke them, which I broke a lot. That was it. Sorry, you got two, and you got a bad temper, right? Get some glue them up, try and play with them, and make do. Don't have some respect.
Yeah, so you learn to look after things.
Yeah.
Are you one to share the challenges that you go through with those who are close to you, or do you keep it to yourself?
No, I'm the journeys. It's funny when you like a lot of males, when you're back, I'm 52 now and physically in unbelievable condition, but let's not go there.
As we can see.
I'm joking, I had to throw that in. Back then there's a lot of keep things to yourself. As I said, my dad was quite quiet. I wouldn't have known if my dad laboured or not. He was big on, never tell let the children be the children and let us be the adults. So I openly speak. I like to tell the journey, because I think the journey's got a lot of good messaging in it. And even when you've got really top athletes, everyone's got a journey. Some have a more privileged journey. There's no doubt about that. So for them to actually engage in a little bit of that, where it was tough, it was rough, you had to fight and scrape. That's interesting to them. It's interesting for them to understand what that's all about as well, because you can be deprived of that if you've been very privileged through a journey, and that a lot of the privileged, yes, they might get the right coaching, they might get the better coaching, the better product in front of them, but do they have that steely resolve where they have to go down that one road and make it happen? So there are a lot of roads when you're privileged.
Yeah, absolutely. So was it difficult for you to learn to open up a bit as a man, having been raised by a father who didn't do it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my family's, Lebanese background, very loving, very family orientated. It's family first. There's no doubt about that. It's a family loving household. And I dodged the wooden spoon and the straps and all that sort of stuff. I was good at it, but
I dodged them.
Yeah, I dodged them. I gave them back. Yeah, it's a hard one. I think I'm now learning more. Even today, I'm a better person in opening up and discussing just general facts, and being probably a lot more vulnerable in that space than I ever was, because we put the armor up. Everything's good. We got it all under control. We can we can look after everything. So, and it's funny because the more you actually decide to not be that person, the more I think to other people you will look even stronger, because you're prepared to go outside of that conversation, and they go, "Wow, how strong is that?" That you can go outside that conversation, be vulnerable, then but still have this really good this other person as well.
Well, and that is actually strength, and I couldn't agree with you anymore. How's that been changing your life, taking more of that approach?
I think it helps when because I I work with helping a lot of other athletes or individuals outside of sport, and I think it just helps in generally getting to understand more of their conversation as well, because I'm prepared to tell the stories of my background and what's taken place, and it's making me, as I said today, right now, as we sit here, I've had a more open experience of being vulnerable today, that has added value to me, and funnily enough that we're sitting here, but this morning, so yeah, so it's I think every day I'm becoming better. I'm also understanding that I need to be in that space because there's more to give when you're in that space.
Totally. And it's so good for the people that you mentor to understand that that's a good way for them to be as well. And that actually their supporters, their fans, the people in their life are going to connect up with them a lot more if they open up and they share some of those things, rather than trying to be, a robot who doesn't feel anything.
And I think it's better for me, to be honest. Like, I think I'll get rewarded more so than anyone else, because I'm prepared to, we do a lot of protecting of ourselves in general. We protect, and the more things that you don't like, that go against you, you tend to protect it even more. And because you don't want that sort of feeling again, potentially. So you go and protect, and you think that's a good way to do it, is protecting. But, more times than not, you need to jump back in the fire.
Backfires, yeah.
You need to jump back in the fire.
What's your take on athletes these days coming out and speaking about their struggles a lot more openly? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think I like it. I like to hear this. The storytelling is great. I feel like the storytelling, because there is, the athlete goes through so much. The scrap heap is enormous. I mean, you think, we see the
result,
the 1% of athlete that gets through and makes it. The carnage on the side of the road of people trying to get through, wanting to be the elite athlete, put their foot in the water, that he or she has a tiny bit of success, then it falls away, but they've spent a life journey trying to get there.
Putting all their eggs in one basket.
That carnage along the road and the scrap heap somewhere in there, is enormous. And so, a lot of them would have been helped and actually would have made the space if they were prepared, probably at the time, to discuss what was going on and not feel like they had to be that type of athlete. Do you know what I mean? So the more vulnerable you can be at a younger age and actually tell your story and how you're feeling at the time is going to allow you to be the better athlete and actually stay in the journey, because they keep a lot in, athletes keep a lot in. And there's also so much, as an athlete, there's so much dead time. And that's the scariest part about it, is there's dead time, there's recovery time. So there's recovery, there's people that are actually there, a lot of times can be saying the wrong things to you because they want to be on the journey with you. But they won't be the person that they need to be for your development. So,
and in that time, your mind's just ticking over.
Dead time is the scariest time for anybody, because it ticks over. It creates visuals and picture books that a lot of times aren't even there, and then you start questioning a lot of things that aren't really going on, but they become real, and that's where people really get off track, and
of course that's not just for athletes. We're talking about everyone.
I think everybody. Yeah, it's a dead time's a crazy time. It's how do I deal with? I think it's an area of working out how do I deal with the dead time. When I do have dead time, what does that look like? What is dead time? Is it just quiet time? Is it time with music in your ears? So, what is it? And how do I not let it take me to a road that I don't want to be on? If things aren't going well for me at the time. Yeah.
So where do you think we're going as a sporting community, particularly in encouraging players to be their true selves and open up about that? What do you see the future being like in regards to that?
I just think we find out, there's great data to get from it, because the more athletes speak, the more you'll be able to create data which will actually show big volumes of potentially one area that's a main player in the athlete, that athletes struggle with. And then so I think we'll get some more data which will actually give us some education around how we can actually help the athlete more often. And the more the athlete's prepared to be open, there was always a fear of the athlete talking to the coach because it looked like they were vulnerable.
And they might get dropped,
and
they might be doubted.
hang on, I want strong men. But now the coaches where there's credit to the coaches now as well, is the coaches have a feel for that. They have an understanding that there's a lot more empathy around for what the athletes are doing. So there's a two-way street, and that's really important. And also the players do understand the pressure of coaches as well now as well. I think that's even that's an even, and so they're sort of getting in each other's worlds. That there's a crossover where before there used to be coach and athlete, and this is the way it works. Where I think there's such a great crossover now, and I've always been of that nature from day one. Is that you're all in on the journey. You got to experience what's in the bubble. So this is a fabric, this is a makeup, and understand what everyone's going through to get, so you can also to experience the outcome and actually assist in the outcome.
So how far have we come?
Well, I think we've come a long way. Yeah. How far have we got to go? I think who knows? You say it about everything. So I think we've got a long way to go, but where are we going? And I think we'll still find, we'll get even more findings out of what the conversations that everyone's having, what they're going to lead to anyway. There'll be some negatives attached to it as well. It's not necessarily all positive, because there has to be, there's some on either side, but I think the majority of it's going to be really positive, because it actually we're getting educated, and you don't want to be a person that's not getting educated. And I think that's if you're continually being educated by anybody, it could be by, I'm educated now by my daughter who's 13, just in her world, and how do they operate? We think
educated a lot, I'm sure.
Crazy. I'm locking her up for 5 years, actually, as we speak. That's how I like the education.
That sounds healthy.
Big negative for her, positive for me. See you in 5 years. I'll give you a lot of all your gadgets in there for 5. But that to understand their world as a 13-year-old, I mean, that their life is crazy. To now as a 13-year-old.
Has she got you doing the TikTok dances?
No, I can't do that. I just won't. She doesn't even. It's one that I keep going, wow, what an education that is. What a ride. Imagine being that age now, and imagine the person that's born today.
A whole different world.
That's been born today. The kids that are born today, what they're going to look like. What world are they going to walk into when they're 13, in that vulnerable space of adolescence, and especially for girls. It's quite traumatic, because there's so much on the line, more so there, the emotional connect at that age. So it's quite an education. Am I enjoying it? Yeah, I am enjoying it, because it's challenging. It's
you love a challenge.
You love a challenge. How often does your left pec go up?
It's involuntary. I'm not doing it on purpose.
It's flicking. I mean, that's a challenge. Oh, 2. You've got both going now.
I apologise to the viewers.
I can't even do that. Well, I mean, I could, but I wore top.
We all know. We all know you can do it, Roger.
Because I did my research on it. I did my research. I did my research. I knew you'd come out with something tight, and I wanted you to take the tight.
Wow,
top.
I don't know if that's how I like to be scouted, but
anyway, so I thought I'd come with something a little different.
Does being truly great come with never being truly satisfied?
And I think some people there are athletes that will be satisfied for sure. Great to me is, have I just delivered on what I've got in front of me? So have I actually, is greatness being number one, is greatness winning 10 titles or being an Olympic champion or having a national record? Greatness is about, have I been able to just do great my way? So put everything on the line. Every time I go out there, on that given day, whatever I've got available to me, I actually offer 100%. So I might not have everything available to me. Mentally, I might not quite be there. Things might not be happening, but I'm still prepared to put myself on the line and actually go after it. And then at the end of the day, you actually get a result and you get an outcome. And you get some great data on that, because every day, whether it's your best day or not, but if I've delivered on everything and actually just put myself on the line, that's positive data. So that's a win every time. And so I think that's, to me, at the end of someone's career, that's greatness, because there's only so many people that can be one. And your number one might be 50. Your number one might be a national champion or a high school champion or a college, collegiate champion. So, or if you're talking sport. So I just think being great is, can I get myself to a position and be educated enough where I understand what it looks like to prepare well enough and to deliver as often as possible. And that's a great, I think that's a great definition of greatness.
Are you satisfied with what you've achieved and the man you are?
No, I'm going to run home when I finish from here because I feel like I'm lacking a bit. No, I think I've got a lot more to do. It's a different phase of my life, to walk off the tennis tour and so I could live in the world of my daughter. And when I say live in the world, be the parent that I need to be instead of, I love giving and I love helping others, but to help my daughter through her journey and be there and experience that journey, I think I need to be the best version there, and that needs to be my greatest result. And so, am I satisfied? Did you say, am I satisfied? I'm satisfied because I'm trying to be as good as I can. I know I'm going to I've got my flaws, and I'll always have flaws, but I'm trying to find new ways of being good. And if my daughter has a smile on her face, and at the end of that, and I'm pretty happy. I think
That's what it's all about.
I think that's what it's all about. When you go back to it, if you can keep it raw, and that's what it's all about. Yeah, going back and being the kid. You know what I mean? Like, so I think we lose the excitement in life because we go from being a kid where it's just blue sky, and then it gets complicated, right? As we get older, and then we get to the business world, the work world, and it gets very complicated. And then we in a good way, we can complicate it with relationships and families and all that. But we actually take away every single time we go up that ladder. We're taking away the kid. And that real sort of that blue sky kid that we jump around and we go in the park and we just chase balls and we're just having fun, smile on our faces, and it's about how do we bring part of the kid DNA back into our adult life, and I think if we can do a bit of that and understand what we're passionate about and always keep a little bit of that involved in our lives, I think we're a chance then, because a lot of times the leveler goes the wrong way. We get too far away from being us, and we become victim to the environment more so. And I think that's where all the drama and the trouble happens, is when we're a victim to the environment and we lose our identity of really who we are. And that's one of the things that I always try and work with people on, is that what's your real identity? And let's bring a bit of the kid back in.
Enough said.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bolton Brothers podcast as we do our part to change the face of men's mental health. Never underestimate how your story can change someone else's life. We can all make a difference. So who's next?